Alright, so video 5 of America's history. We're still in the colonial period. We left off with King George's War. We're going to try and finish the colonial period in this video. So next video we'll start in the Revolutionary period. Alright, Louisburg, the Gibraltar of the North, the chief fortress of Cape Breton, was besieged and captured by a New England force underneath the command of Sir William Pepperell. 1748, and I'm going to butcher this name, but you had the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, if that's even close to being correct. This was the closing to King George's War, and underneath this treaty, Louisburg was restored to France, much to the dissatisfaction of the New England colonists. 1749, the Ohio Company was formed to colonize the Ohio Valley. It received a grant of a vast tract of land from King George. In 1750, the English Parliament passed a law limiting the erection of iron mills and forges in America so as to compel the importation of raw iron from England. Now, this policy had been used already in connection with the other manufactured products, but only in this instance was an infant industry stifled. So it was a part of England's mercantile policy to confine the colonies to the production of raw materials. I'm sure you guys remember learning about this back in grade school in 1752 when Ben Franklin became famous for his discoveries in electricity. You know, he's out there with a kite and the key and he gets struck by electricity. Right. Well, that's this. 1753, George Washington was sent by this governor right here, Dinwiddie of Virginia, to order the French pioneers out of the Ohio Valley. Now, the English based their claims to this region on the charters which made the Pacific Ocean the western boundary of colonies set up along the Atlantic seaboard, right? France claimed the same territory as a result of the discovery of the interior riverways, claiming all lands watered by a river and that water by all its tributaries. And that's what will begin the French and Indian War, the fourth and last intercolonial war breaking out between the French and English. This war would have dramatic effects on the course of history. In fact, it was this war that pretty much decided either if English or French was going to be the main language of the world. Now, a fort begun by the English on the present site of Pittsburgh was taken by the French and named this. A relief expedition under Washington was besieged in Fort Necessity and compelled to retire and retreat. This leads to, in that same year, a colonial congress meeting in Albany to organize a union of all the colonies for defense against the French and Indians. It was Ben Franklin that presented a plan of union which was rejected by the colonies because of the home government and was given too much power. It was also rejected by the home government because the colonies were allowed too much independence. In 1755, General Braddock here led an English army against the French in Ohio. They were ambushed and absolutely defeated. Washington came in and saved what was left of the remaining soldiers. Also that same year, a Massachusetts officer removed the Acadians because their French sympathies made them dangerous. Also that same year, you had the Iroquois natives aided by the colonists defeating a French and Indian army on Lake George. This man here in 1756 captured several forts along the New York frontier. Now in 1757 there was a lot of infighting and quarrels going on as far as Massachusetts colonial legislation, fighting with governors, and at the same time Pennsylvania was fighting with their governor a lot over their salaries. But fast forward into 1758, you had the French defeating an English army on Lake Champlain, but the English conquered the entire Ohio Valley and for the second time captured the great fortress of Louisburg. In 1759, the English conquered the entire Lake Champlain region, and General Wolfe, scaling the Heights of Abraham, captured Quebec. The opposing generals were both mortally wounded in this battle. 1760 is the year Montreal surrendered to the English and the conquest of Canada was completed. This is also the same year George III becomes King of England. Now, George III tried to rule both England and the colonies without any attention to the wishes of the people. His abstinency and narrow-mindedness helped to drive the colonies into revolt and secured for them the sympathy of many leading Whigs over in England. 1761, the navigation laws of 1651 and 1660, which had been more or less not reinforced, they were pretty lax with it, were now absolutely revived. Warships were placed along the coast to stop the trade, which had grown with France, Spain, and their West Indian colonies. This also drastically hurt the smugglers in the northern colonies as well. And because of that, you had the writs of assistance were issued as a means of assistance in the enforcement of the Navigation Acts. And as I was saying, this caused a lot of bitterness and dissatisfaction in the New England colonies, which had become the center for smuggling. These writs of assistance were general search warrants given to customs officials in which they themselves could enter in the name of any person suspected of concealing smuggled goods. So they pretty much gave themselves the power to break into any house and search any property that they wanted to. So James Otis here, a leading lawyer in Massachusetts, made this big speech that was widely celebrated, talking about denying the right of the English government to issue writs of assistance or to even pass an act of trade which levied a tax on the colonies. And as I said, this speech was widely celebrated, and John Adams even said that his speech breathed into this nation the breath of life. John Adams also went on to say, "Every man of an immense crowded audience appeared to me as away as I did, ready to take arms against writs of assistance." So this is a big moment in American history. 1763, the Treaty of Paris, which ends the last intercolonial war between England and France. And of course, that year is the year you end up with the 1763 Royal Proclamation that limits the colonial expansion westward. And from here is when we enter into the Revolutionary period, so that's where we'll pick up on the next video. Thanks for sticking around. Good talk.